This story may challenge what you think you know about wealth, progress, and where modernity truly began. For centuries, we've been told a familiar narrative that modern economic systems emerged gradually from Western Europe, that prosperity rose organically from feudal roots, trade guilds, and eventually industrial capitalism. But history, when examined closely, tells a far more complicated story. While much of early medieval Western Europe was fragmented, localized, and economically narrow, one city was doing the opposite, deliberately, systematically, at scale. That city was Baghdad. This period is often labeled the Islamic Golden Age, but that phrase hides more than it reveals. It sounds poetic, almost accidental, as if prosperity simply bloomed. What actually powered this era was not vague brilliance or cultural luck, it was design. A specific economic system, built intentionally, managed deliberately, and engineered to connect the world. Welcome to The Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. In the year 762, a decision was made that would quietly reshape the global economy for centuries. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur ordered the construction of a new capital city, not by inheriting an ancient imperial center, but by designing one from scratch. This wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. Baghdad was built to do something no other city of its time was attempting at this scale, to connect the world. Its location was no accident. Baghdad sat along the Tigris River, near the crossroads of the most important trade networks of the early medieval era. To the east lay Persia, India, and China. To the south, the Indian Ocean trade routes linking East Africa and Southeast Asia. To the west, Byzantium and the Mediterranean. To the north, the routes into Central Asia. This geography mattered. It meant goods, ideas, people, and capital could flow through Baghdad in every direction. But geography alone does not create wealth. Plenty of cities sat on trade routes and remained marginal. What made Baghdad different was that it was designed to absorb that flow rather than resist it. From the beginning, Baghdad functioned as infrastructure. Roads, canals, markets, warehouses, and administrative centers were not afterthoughts. They were the city's purpose. The Abbasids didn't just rule territory, they managed systems. Tax collection, legal enforcement, and commercial regulation were centralized and predictable for the standards of the era. That predictability mattered more than any single ruler's brilliance. It created trust. And trust in economic history is the rarest and most valuable commodity of all. In a time when most people lived and died within a few miles of where they were born, Baghdad operated on a global scale. Merchants arrived speaking different languages, carrying goods from thousands of miles away. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, furs from the north, glass and textiles from the Mediterranean. This wasn't occasional trade, it was continuous. Baghdad didn't depend on a single resource or region. It diversified long before diversification was a concept. If one route faltered, others compensated. If one market cooled, another heated up. The city didn't just trade, it coordinated. This stands in sharp contrast to much of early medieval Europe, where economies were largely local, fragmented, and constrained by limited coinage and weak long-distance trust networks. Wealth existed, but it was locked in land and status, not circulating through markets. Trade happened cautiously, slowly, and often violently. Baghdad normalized distance. It treated long-range exchange not as an exception, but as the foundation of prosperity. That foundation required money, not just coins, but systems. The Abbasid economy used gold and silver extensively, but more importantly, it innovated around them. Carrying precious metal across deserts and oceans was dangerous and inefficient, so merchants relied on credit instruments that allowed value to move without metal. Early forms of bills of exchange meant a trader could deposit funds in one city and withdraw them in another, relying on trust networks backed by legal enforcement. In practical terms, capital could circulate faster, farther, and safer than anywhere in the world at the time. This wasn't accidental. It required legal clarity, contract enforcement, and reputational systems that punished fraud and rewarded reliability. Baghdad provided that environment. Courts resolved commercial disputes, markets were regulated enough to function, but not so tightly that innovation suffocated. The state didn't micromanage trade, it made trade possible. That distinction matters. Wealth wasn't extracted and hidden, it moved. And as it moved, it multiplied. What's striking is how modern this sounds. Financial historians often treat sophisticated banking and credit as late European inventions. But Baghdad was already doing versions of this centuries earlier, not with financial textbooks, but with practical systems built around necessity. The result was scale. Merchants operated across continents, risk spread, productivity increased, and Baghdad absorbed a share of it all. But commerce alone doesn't explain Baghdad's rise. Its wealth was reinforced by something far more unusual for its time: the systematic investment in knowledge as an economic asset. This is where the Abbasid Golden Age earns its name. Knowledge wasn't confined to theology or elite curiosity. It was actively sought, funded, and translated because it made the system work better. The Abbasids sponsored a massive translation movement, bringing works of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and engineering from Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions into Arabic. This wasn't cultural charity, it was economic strategy. Better mathematics meant better accounting, navigation, and engineering. Better astronomy meant accurate calendars and trade timing. Better medicine meant healthier populations and longer productive lives. Knowledge increased output. Output increased wealth. Institutions like the House of Wisdom were not symbolic libraries, they were research centers. Scholars were paid salaries, translation was incentivized, debate was encouraged. This created something rare in pre-modern history: a professional intellectual class integrated into the economic system. While much of Western Europe struggled to preserve fragments of classical knowledge, Baghdad consolidated it, expanded it, applied it, and scaled it. Urban life reflected this complexity. Baghdad was enormous for medieval standards, likely one of the largest cities on Earth at its peak. Markets specialized, crafts diversified, public amenities like baths, hospitals, and schools were widespread. This wasn't wealth concentrated at the top, it was an ecosystem, a dense, layered economy where different roles reinforced one another. Merchants needed scribes, scholars needed patrons, officials needed administrators. Specialization was rewarded, and the city functioned because complexity was managed rather than suppressed. Again, the contrast matters. In much of Western Europe after the fall of Rome, cities shrank, literacy narrowed, trade contracted, power localized. Baghdad moved in the opposite direction. It grew, it centralized, it connected. The result wasn't just cultural brilliance, it was sustained prosperity. This isn't a romantic story. The Abbasid world had inequality, conflict, and political tension. But structurally, it understood something many societies miss. Wealth is not just accumulated, it is enabled. Baghdad didn't become rich because it conquered more land than everyone else. It became rich because it reduced friction. It lowered the cost of moving goods, money, and ideas. It made complexity manageable. This is the real lesson of Baghdad's rise. But no system lasts forever. The first cracks didn't appear in markets or trade routes, they appeared in governance. The Abbasid Caliphate grew vast, too vast to be managed with the same coherence that had powered its rise. Regional governors gained autonomy, military leaders accumulated leverage, tax revenues fragmented. Trust depends on enforcement. Contracts only work if someone can enforce them. Credit only flows if defaults are predictable. As political coordination weakened, these guarantees eroded slowly and quietly. Baghdad's economy also became more complex, and complexity cuts both ways. Specialization increases productivity, but it also increases dependency. When flows slowed or diverted, the system didn't collapse immediately, it became fragile. Internal power struggles accelerated this process. Court politics diverted resources, military spending rose, short-term extraction replaced long-term investment. Still, Baghdad endured. For centuries, it remained one of the world's most important economic and intellectual centers. Decline was gradual, not sudden. The final blow, when it came, was external. In 1258, Mongol forces reached Baghdad. The siege was catastrophic. Infrastructure destroyed, libraries burned, administrative continuity collapsed. But it's a mistake to see this as the sole cause. The Mongols didn't destroy a perfectly functioning system, they shattered one that had already lost its ability to protect itself. What's striking is how quickly prosperity vanished once coordination failed. Trade networks unraveled, credit collapsed, specialized labor dispersed. Wealth didn't migrate cleanly, it fragmented. This is the dark mirror of Baghdad's rise. Just as connectivity created prosperity, disconnection